The moment my wife Helen was lowered into the ground, the world didn't just go quiet, it turned hollow. The sounds of the Monterey coast, the gulls, the distant waves became a taunt. I am Frank Mercer, 60 years old, widower, a structural engineer by trade, a man who believed in the integrity of things you could see and touch, a father to my son, David, and a father-in-law to his wife, Chloe. We stood on the manicured lawn of the funeral home, the salt-laced wind snatching at the edges of the prayer cards. Condolences from people I hadn't seen in years dissolved into the air, meaningless. I said nothing about the $43 million Helen had left me. I said nothing about the architectural masterpiece of a villa perched on the bluff, a structure I had helped design that stood firmly in my name. My silence wasn't emptiness. It was a loaded chamber. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, shifted her weight, her posture that of a CEO entering a hostile boardroom. Phones were still held aloft, capturing the grief for later social media posts. She took 3 sharp, deliberate steps on the gravel, her heels cracking the silence like gunshots. "Start packing, Frank." Her voice cut through the murmur, loud and clear for the audience. "The free ride is over. You're not staying in that house." David stared at his shoes as if the answers to how his life had led here were scuffed into the leather. "Chloe, please," he muttered. It was the tone you use to calm a startled animal you know is about to bolt. He didn't look at me. He didn't offer a steadying hand. He just let his wife's words hang in the air, the ultimate betrayal. I could have told them right then. I could have explained that Helen didn't just leave wealth, she engineered a legacy. That the villa wasn't just a house, it was a complex system of legal load-bearing walls designed to withstand exactly this kind of pressure. That $43 million isn't a number, it's a moat. But I let the Pacific do the talking for me. I watched the spray crash against the sea wall. I watched Chloe's cold, expectant smile, waiting for the old man to crumble. "All right," I said. The word was flat, solid. A single block of granite dropped between us. David flinched. Chloe let out a short, derisive laugh, a sound with sharp edges. "Good," she said, her eyes gleaming with premature victory. "Don't take too long. We're having the locks changed by tonight." The clock inside the funeral home ticked on, indifferent. A vacuum cleaner whined in a distant room. I folded my prayer card, tucked it into the breast pocket of my suit, right next to Helen's old engineer's compass, its brass casing cool against my chest. She used to say, "A shaky foundation dooms any structure." So I checked my foundations. I calculated the stress points of rage and the tensile strength of patience. I analyzed the faces in the crowd, their potential as witnesses or adversaries. I visualized the villa's windows, the ones Helen and I had positioned to catch the morning light, now with my son and his wife's hands on the latches. I computed the immediate cost of a scene against the long-term strategic value of letting legal documents do the screaming. "David," I said, and my son's head finally lifted, his eyes haunted. "Take your wife home." He started to stammer something about grief, about stress, about how people aren't themselves. The ocean wind stole his weak excuses and scattered them. I took a single step back from both of them, and I let the silence I was cultivating stretch out, vast and deep as the ocean behind me. On the day I buried my wife, I said nothing about the $43 million or the villa deeded solely to me. I said nothing while my daughter-in-law publicly evicted me. I said, "All right." And then I began a project they never saw coming, a project that would shatter their greedy little world into dust. The workshop smelled of sawdust, marine varnish, and the faint, lingering scent of Helen's jasmine tea. I didn't flip the light switch. I stood in the gloom, letting the familiar shapes of my tools comfort me. This wasn't the main villa. This was my sanctuary, a rugged, single-story workshop built into the lee of the sea wall, with a corrugated metal roof that sang when the north wind blew. Helen called it my mind's blueprint room. I used to bring her tea out here when she was lost in a complex structural calculation, her fingers stained with ink from the schematics she drew on anything she could find. Napkins, the backs of envelopes. Helen Mercer was a woman of profound quiet, but her mind was a roaring engine of precision. In our life together, she calculated everything. Stress tolerances, wind loads, the emotional weight of a room. She believed the way something was designed revealed its ultimate purpose. A shaky foundation dooms any structure, she'd say. Always calculate twice. Act once. My hand found the edge of her old drafting table, the surface still scarred from a utility knife she'd never bothered to smooth out. Her tools lay in a segmented tray, perfectly ordered. Calculators, scales, architect's rulers, tubes of graphite now too hard to use. Next to them sat a scuffed leather portfolio stamped with her initials, HM. Inside were her private files. Notes on soil stability, schematics of the villa's unique cantilevers, permits from the 90s, receipts for the Italian tiles we'd imported for the main hall. Helen had a creed. Digital files can be hacked, paper remembers. She kept fireproof boxes of meticulously labeled files. Insurance, medical, property bluff, David College, legal frank. I opened the one marked legal frank with a hand that betrayed a slight tremor. Inside were copies of the trust, the villa's deed, and a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper I'd never seen. It wasn't printed. It was handwritten in her fluid, mathematical script. Do not engage until the load is critical. No signature, just that one perfect instruction. I sat on her worn stool, the wood groaning familiarly, and stared at the words. This wasn't a plea. It was a schematic. She wasn't telling me to be passive. She was telling me to let the opposing force reveal its full weight before I applied the counterforce. Not all beams are meant to be seen. Some are meant to hold everything up while the rest of the structure is assembled. Outside, the sea was restless, but the tide was still out. I reached into my pocket and pulled out her engineer's compass. The weight was comforting, an anchor. I ran my thumb over the brass and found the nearly invisible seam I'd never paid attention to. A gentle press, and a hidden compartment slid open. Inside, a single, tightly folded square of paper, Helen's handwriting again. I didn't read it. Not yet. Not here. I placed it carefully on the table beside the leather portfolio, beside her tools that still seemed to hold the warmth of her hands. Instead, I stood, walked to the large rolling door, and shoved it open. The morning light, sharp and clear, flooded the space, illuminating motes of dust that danced like suspended memories. For the first time since the funeral, I drew a breath that didn't feel like it was tearing my lungs apart. I hadn't been left adrift. I had been given a set of plans. You know, it's a terrifying feeling. To realize the people you love, the people you trust with your life, are secretly measuring you for a coffin. They're not seeing a person, they're seeing an obstacle, a problem to be removed. Has that ever happened to you? That moment when a smile hides a knife? When you realize the battle lines have been drawn inside your own home? If you've ever felt that cold shock of betrayal, that feeling of your own family trying to erase you, then you understand why what I did next wasn't just about money. It was about survival. Stick with me, because this is where the real fight begins. The next morning, I packed a single duffel bag. My project ledger, a few changes of clothes, a tin of wax for my tools, and Helen's compass. Everything else could stay. The villa was stone and glass, but this workshop was built from resolve. And here, the air didn't judge. A line of cormorants watched from the sea wall as I unlocked the villa's front door. The hinges groaned a familiar welcome. Helen's grand piano still dominated the living room, a silent monument to her. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows, illuminating the floating dust, each particle a frozen memory. I didn't waste time. I went to the study, the room Helen had used as her command center. Her computer was gone, likely taken by Chloe, but they'd missed the important stuff. The stuff that couldn't be dragged and dropped into a trash icon. I opened the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, the one labeled Active Projects Personal. Inside were the same color-coded files from the workshop, but more. There was a list of contacts. Robert Evans, Esquire, was at the top. I dialed the number. It was answered on the second ring. Evans Legal. "This is Frank Mercer," I said, my voice firmer than it had been in weeks. "My wife Helen left me a file. Your name was in it. A pause, then a shift in tenor. Frank, she said you'd call one day. She left me everything, I said, but I need to know how to secure it. You don't secure it, Frank, Robert replied, his voice calm, methodical. You fortify it. We build legal walls so high that no one can even see what they're trying to steal. Don't get emotional. Get notarized. Come to my office tomorrow. I'll have the blueprints ready. When I hung up, my hand was steady on the receiver. The house felt different, smaller but more focused. I was no longer a grieving widower. I was a project manager on a critical path. I spent the next hour creating a war room on Helen's massive oak desk. The trust documents went into a red binder, the property deeds into a blue one. I created a spreadsheet not of grief but of action items. Bank, county recorder, our family physician. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was executing a plan. Later, I drove into town to the main post office. The clerk, an older man named Bill, recognized me. Mr. Mercer, he said, his voice soft with sympathy. I'm so sorry about Helen. Thank you, Bill, I said, then placed my notepad on the counter. I need to understand certified mail, return receipts, electronic tracking, everything that creates an unbreakable chain of custody. He blinked. Legal issues. Legal certainty, I corrected, and I need every step time-stamped. I walked out with a stack of forms and a new understanding of postal regulations. David hadn't called. Chloe hadn't written. Their silence was a gift. It gave me room to maneuver. Back at the villa, I opened the hidden safe behind a panel in the study, the one whose combination was the date we broke ground on the house. Inside was Helen's master project notebook. On the first page, in her bold script, was a phrase she'd circled 3 times. Grief can make you pause. Betrayal must make you precise. I copied it onto the first page of my own ledger. Beneath it, I started a checklist. Confirm trust structure with Robert Evans. Secure certified copies of all deeds. File memorandum of trust with county recorder. Schedule capacity assessment with Dr. Miller. Obtain physician's letter of competency. Contact bank. Initiate high-security protocols. Revoke any old, dormant powers of attorney. Secure phone account against unauthorized changes. Prepare certified mail packages for all institutions. The list grew, a cascade of actionable intelligence. My handwriting, usually a messy scrawl, became tight and controlled. I began color-coding tasks with highlighters, green for legal, blue for financial, red for medical. That evening, I called Robert Evans back. I've read the trust, I told him. I understand the mechanisms. I need to ensure they're fail-safe. He exhaled, a sound of clear approval. We'll make sure of it, Frank. And if they come knocking with their demands, we won't answer the door. We'll hand them a subpoena and show them the mountain of paperwork they'd have to climb. I allowed myself a thin smile. I never did like messy construction sites. No one does, he replied. But you, Frank, you've got the master plans now. Let's start pouring the foundation. The call ended. I sat in the deepening twilight, the phone heavy in my hand. Then I picked up Helen's compass from the desk, held it to my ear, and listened to its steady, relentless tick sync with my own heartbeat. 1 tick for the past, 1 tick for the present, 1 tick for the reckoning to come. Tomorrow, we would start building in ink and law. The first shot across my bow came not from Chloe, but from a Dr. Ian Moss. His office called 2 days after my meeting with Robert Evans, their tone slick with faux concern. Mr. Mercer, we'd like to schedule a neurocognitive assessment. It's standard procedure when a family expresses concern about a loved one's well-being after a loss. I gripped Helen's compass in my pocket, its brass cool and steadying. Which family member expressed this concern? I'm not at liberty to say, but it's a close relative. We just want to ensure you're receiving the proper support. The trap was so obvious it was almost insulting. Decline and they'd note my noncompliance. except and I'd be walking into their web. I have a long-standing physician, Dr. Miller, I said calmly. I'll be discussing my well-being with him. Thank you for the call. I hung up and immediately dialed Robert. They're moving, a Dr. Ian Moss. They're starting the incompetence play. Predictable, Robert's voice was a low rumble of satisfaction. But clumsy. We're already ahead of them. Dr. Miller's capacity letter is drafted and notarized. It's being couriered to the court as we speak. They're trying to dig a hole with a spoon, Frank, while we've got a bulldozer. The next morning, I executed phase 1 of my counterassault. I didn't go to the villa. I went to the county recorder's office. I filed the memorandum of trust, a public declaration that the villa and its assets were locked in an ironclad structure. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, stamped the document with a definitive thud. The sound echoed in the marble hallways. It was the sound of a gate slamming shut. From there, I went to the bank. I didn't speak to a teller. I asked for the branch manager and the head of security. In a private room with Robert on speakerphone, we enacted protocol Haven. Two-factor authentication was hardened. A secret password was established for any account inquiries. A system flag was placed on my profile. No TRANSACTIONS. No information to be RELEASED without in-person verification and code phrase. The phrase I chose was one only Helen would know. The load is critical. The bank manager, a stern woman in her 50s, looked at me with a new respect. It's done, Mr. Mercer. Your accounts are now a vault. As I left, my phone buzzed. A text from David. Dad, we need to talk. The hotel project is in trouble. We're going to lose everything. I stared at the message. The desperation was palpable. This was no longer about greed. It was about their impending financial implosion. I typed back a single, calculated sentence. I am willing to listen to a formal business proposal after the current matters are resolved. I didn't wait for a reply. I had a more important meeting. I drove to a nondescript building in Salinas, to the office of a private investigator named Miles Donovan, a man Robert Evans trusted implicitly. Donovan was ex-military with a quiet intensity and a gaze that missed nothing. Mr. Mercer, he said, shaking my hand with a firm, calloused grip. Robert filled me in. You need the full picture. I need to know what I'm up against. I need to know about Washington Ventures LLC, their hotel project, everything. He nodded, sliding a folder across his desk. It's worse than you think. They didn't just over-leverage, they committed fraud. I opened the folder. Inside were photos of the stalled hotel site, a concrete skeleton weeping rust into the coastal air. There were financial records showing phantom contractors, inflated invoices, and funds diverted to personal accounts. There were emails between Chloe and a shady project manager discussing how to hide the cost overruns from their investors. They're not just drowning, Mr. Mercer, Donovan said, his voice flat. They're trying to take everyone down with them. They need a massive cash infusion to cover the tracks before the state regulators finish their audit. Your inheritance isn't a lifeline for them. It's a get-out-of-jail-free card. The pieces clicked into place with the finality of a deadbolt. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was a criminal enterprise, and my son was either a willing accomplice or a dangerously oblivious fool. The weight of it settled on me, not as a burden but as a grim certainty. Helen had been right. The load was critical. The remodeling celebration invitation arrived via a mass email. I wasn't on the list, but Eleanor, my neighbor and Helen's oldest friend, forwarded it to me with a single line. The audacity. I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't let them rewrite history in my own home. The day of the party, I put on the navy blazer Helen had bought me for our 30th anniversary. I looked every one of my 60 years, but I stood like a man who had built things that could withstand earthquakes. I arrived as the party was in full swing. A valet I didn't recognize tried to take my keys. I ignored him and walked straight through the open front door. The music died a sudden death as I crossed the threshold. Dozens of faces turned toward me, their conversations freezing in mid-sentence. The air stank of new paint and ambition. Chloe stood by the fireplace, which now held some grotesque modern sculpture instead of our family photos. She wore a crimson dress, a slash of color in the monochrome room she had created. Her smile vanished when she saw me. "Frank," she said, her voice a strained chirp. "What a surprise." "I brought a housewarming gift," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. I held up a single, old, tarnished key, the one she had taken from the workshop. "I thought you might have lost yours." A nervous titter ran through the crowd. She recovered quickly, her smile returning, brittle as glass. "We're just celebrating the refresh. Doesn't the place look incredible?" I looked around slowly, making eye contact with a few of the neighbors, people who had known Helen, who had broken bread at this very table. "You changed the paint," I said. "You moved the furniture, but you forgot one thing." I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, holding it up for all to see. It was a copy of the deed, my name bold and clear at the top. "You can't redecorate your way into ownership, Chloe. The foundation is still mine." The silence was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in someone's glass. David emerged from the kitchen, his face ashen. "Dad, don't do this." "I'm not doing anything, David. I'm just stating a fact. This house is built on a foundation of trust and love. Your wife seems to think it's built on a foundation of lies and stolen keys." Chloe's composure shattered. "Get out," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "I am out," I said, placing the old key on the new, sterile-looking console table by the door. "But the house stays with me." I turned and walked out, the weight of a dozen stairs on my back. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. I had drawn a line in the sand and everyone had seen it. The retaliation was swift and dirty. The next day, a petition for emergency temporary guardianship was filed with the court. Chloe's attorney, a slick young man named Sterling, cited my erratic and confrontational behavior at the party, my isolation, and potential cognitive decline as reasons for David to assume control of my affairs. They had attached the missing signature page from the trust as evidence of estate planning irregularities. Robert Evans was waiting for me in his conference room, a predator's smile on his face. "They took the bait," he said, slapping the petition down on the table. "They found the one tiny flaw, the one unsigned clause, and they're swinging with all their might. They have no idea we've already poured 10 feet of concrete around it." He showed me the affidavit we had prepared, a sworn statement detailing Helen's clear intent, backed by her handwritten note from the Compass. Attached was Dr. Miller's robust letter and the report from Dr. Lydia Chen, the neuropsychologist he had on retainer, who had assessed me days prior and found my cognitive faculties superior for my age demographic. "The hearing is in 48 hours, Robert said. "We're not going to defend Frank. We're going to annihilate." The night before the hearing, David came to the workshop. He stood outside in the rain, looking like a drowned ghost. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Dad," he said, water dripping from his nose, "you have to stop this. You're going to destroy us." "You're doing a fine job of that yourselves," I replied, my voice even. "The fraudulent invoices, David, the diverted funds. Did you know, or were you just not paying attention?" He stared at me, his eyes wide with shock and fear. He hadn't known I knew. It's not like that. Chloe handles the finances," she said. "She said a lot of things," I interrupted. "And you believed her. You believed her over the parents who raised you. You chose a sinking ship and tried to use my life raft as a patch. Now you're going to drown, and you want to blame me for not handing you the oars." "I'm your son," he cried, his voice breaking. "And I am your father," I said, the words heavy with a finality that chilled even me. "And you tried to have me declared incompetent. You stood by while your wife called me a leech. You don't get to play the son card now. The time for that was before you helped them change the locks. I closed the door. I listened to his car start and drive away, the sound swallowed by the rain and the surf. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but a structure built on a lie cannot stand. Sometimes you have to let the weak parts collapse to save the whole. The courtroom was a theater of the absurd. Chloe and Sterling sat at their table projecting confidence. David sat beside her, a hollow man. Robert and I sat at ours, a bastion of quiet preparedness. Judge Wilkins was a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for having zero tolerance for frivolity. She listened as Sterling presented his case, painting a picture of a confused, grieving old man being manipulated by a greedy lawyer. When it was Robert's turn, he stood slowly. "Your Honor, rather than rebut these fanciful allegations, we would like to establish a few facts." He moved with the methodical precision of a bomb disposal expert. Exhibit A, a capacity assessment from Dr. Lydia Chen, a leading geriatric neuropsychologist. Exhibit B, the filed memorandum of trust and the county-recorded deed. Exhibit C, bank security protocols initiated by Mr. Mercer himself. Exhibit D, an affidavit of intent from the late Helen Mercer, along with her complete, signed estate plan, demonstrating the missing signature was a simple administrative error, superseded by her clear, documented wishes. He placed each document before the judge. Then he turned to Sterling. "The petitioner's case rests on whispers and assumptions. Ours rests on ink, law, and the unassailable competence of Frank Mercer." The judge peered over her glasses at Sterling. "Counselor, do you have any actual evidence of cognitive decline, a medical opinion, a witnessed incident of incapacity?" Sterling fumbled. "Your Honor, the family's concern is not evidence," Judge Wilkins cut him off. "I rule based on fact, not feeling." She turned to me. "Mr. Mercer, is there anything you'd like to add?" I stood. "Your Honor, my wife was an engineer. She taught me that the integrity of a structure is determined long before the first load is applied. She designed our life together and our future with that same integrity. What you see here today is not a family dispute. It is a stress test. And I am here to prove that the structure she built and the man she loved are both sound." The judge held my gaze for a long moment, then looked down at her papers. "Petition denied. The temporary guardianship is vacated. All rights and authorities remain solely with Frank Mercer. The trust is upheld in its entirety. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell, a single sharp crack that felt like the ceiling of a tomb, for them. Chloe made a small, strangled sound. David put his head in his hands. Sterling began frantically gathering his papers. Robert leaned over. They didn't just lose Frank, they were out-engineered. I walked out of the courthouse into the clean, coastal air. The storm had passed. The foundation had held. The final reckoning came a month later. The state regulators, tipped off by an anonymous package of documents courtesy of Miles Donovan, shut down the Washington Ventures hotel project. Fraud charges were filed. Chloe was indicted on multiple counts. In the ensuing chaos, their assets were frozen, then seized. David showed up at the villa one last time. He had lost weight. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by a gaunt weariness. "She's leaving me," he said, his voice empty. "Taking what's left. She blames me for everything." I didn't say "I told you so." The ruins of his life were punishment enough. "What will you do?" I asked. "I don't know." He looked at the house, at the legacy he had tried to steal and in doing so had lost forever. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it." I nodded. It was all I could offer. The bridge between us was ash, and some things cannot be rebuilt. After he left, I did what Helen would have wanted. I didn't hoard my victory. I used it. I established the Helen Mercer Foundation for Financial Integrity, an organization dedicated to educating seniors about estate planning and protecting them from predatory family members. I donated a significant portion of the inheritance to fund it, ensuring her brilliance would protect others long after I was gone. I reopened the workshop, not as a place of hiding but as a place of creation. I started building furniture again, simple, solid pieces from reclaimed wood. I left a bench I'd made under the sycamore tree in the garden with a small sign, "Rest here." One afternoon, I was sanding the edge of a table when a young couple from down the street stopped by. They were nervous, holding a baby. "Mr. Mercer," the young man said, we heard what happened. We're having some issues with my wife's family trying to pressure us over our house. We didn't know who to talk to." I put down my sander. I offered them a seat on the bench I'd built. I poured them 2 glasses of cold water, and I began to tell them about load-bearing walls, about foundations, and about the quiet, unshakable strength that comes from knowing what is rightfully yours. Because that's the thing about building something solid. It doesn't just shelter you, it becomes a landmark for others who are lost in the storm. And that's how you build a second life from the rubble of betrayal. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. The right to your own home, your own mind, your own peace. It's a fight no one should have to face, but too many do. Maybe you've seen it happen. Maybe you've felt that chill yourself, watching someone you love look at you not with affection, but with calculation. If you have a story, if you faced something similar, I hope you found a little strength in mine. The comment section can be a powerful thing, a place to share, to warn, to support. You're not alone. Now it's your turn. Tell me, have you ever had to prove your own strength when everyone around you assumed you were weak?